Hey, welcome to week 6. Can you believe we're starting week 6? This semester is actually starting to move pretty quickly, and we're going to race through time. We're going to move from the time of Ovid, which is about the same time as Christ, and we're going to leapfrog a whole lot of years. We're going to go right straight into the medieval period. As a matter of fact, we're going to leapfrog right into the English speaking world at about the medieval period. And we're going to look at one of the great King Arthur stories, the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, sometimes pronounced Gawain. You're wondering how do you say it? Do I say it Gawain or do I say it Gawain? Well, the correct answer is both, because the mysterious anonymous writer of this marvelous epic poem wrote the poem where he's very strict in his rhythms, and sometimes it's Gawain when he needs a rhythm that requires a Gawain, and sometimes it's Gawain when he needs a strict Gawain. So I guess both would be correct. So I like Gawain. And so it's going to be one of the great King Arthur stories. We're going to talk about chivalry this week, whether or not it's dead, as we often hear, or whether it's just sleeping, or maybe it's just on the respirator here and it's just barely holding on. A couple things I want to remind you is that we're coming down to the end. Our final major paper is a research paper that'll be due at the end of week 7. And of course, that will be that's attached here to the end of this week. I've put it there. And I also want to remind you that if you'd rather do something other than write a research paper, you could do a creative research project. Some of you might be creative in the arts. Maybe you're a painter, sculptor. I've even had somebody who was very skilled at Indian pottery and did some very interesting narrative pots in Navajo style that told some of the stories. Perhaps you're a writer and you want to try your hand at some monologues, like a one-person player or 2 or 3 in the voice of one of the characters. Maybe you're a poet and you want to try your hand at some poems inspired by the works that we have looked at. I've given you several options on the assignment sheet, but that'll be due at the end of week 7. And also, I encourage you again to take a look at the attachment there with the assignment from the library, where Bliss Kuntz, one of the librarians, talks a little bit about how to use the library from wherever you are. So I don't care where you are on the planet right now. You can actually access the college's databases and get all kinds of information. Later, we're going to actually talk with Bliss, and she can give us some other hints. Anyway, but we're going to spend some time at the round table of King Arthur. When we think of great myths, and we start to get into the English-speaking world, there is no greater myth in the English-speaking world than that of the legendary King Arthur and his round table and his virtuous knights and the adventures that go there, and of course the splendors of Camelot. And one of the interesting things, of course, about the Arthur legend is that, unlike others, it will end badly. I have heard it argued that there are 2 kinds of myths. There is the story that ultimately is the story much like the one we've been talking about, and then there's the King Arthur myth, where the hero, despite all promise, will ultimately fail. There aren't very many where the hero truly fails. There are some where he dies, there are some where he's humiliated or she's humiliated, but there are very few of absolute failure, and that's what how I would depict King Arthur. So we'll talk about that. So it's going to be a great week. Hey, I want to encourage you to keep up with the discussions if you can do so early in the week. that makes the discussions more useful because then you get more of a chance to respond to each other. You get some of the insights of each other and myself and Hannah, and I think that you'll gain more from that. So I encourage you to stay on top of those, and let's get started here, and let's have a good week of some chivalry. So, all right, let's get